As the New York Giants transition into year 3 of the Brian Dable, Joe Shane era, we start year 6 of the Daniel Jones era. And one thing that we know for sure is that he is the most polarizing player on this team. I am joined by the very own Big Dash Nose, and we are going to unpack why this young man is so heavily scrutinized and so equally heavily loved. I'm Coach Gene Clemons. I've got a giant issue. 3, 2, 1. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a giant issue. I'm Coach Gene Clemons. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for making me your first listen or your last listen of the day. Make sure that you like and subscribe all the places that you can like and subscribe. Make sure you download, send it to a friend, do all those beautiful things. I am joined by the one and only Big Dash. Big Dash, hey, how you doing today, man?
I'm good, man. Just did some school shopping for the kids because over here in Arizona they start school next week. So just ran some errands. I was chilling, and yeah, I'm doing pretty good, man. Thank you for having me, and much appreciated.
Absolutely. I thought it was a good. I thought you were a good person to talk to about this because you've been bringing up what's been going on with the fan base and how the fan base has been receptive to Daniel Jones over the essentially since he's been drafted. I want to start there. I want to go back to the draft day because I think that's where everything started with how fans feel about Daniel Jones and whether or not they believe he was the long-term answer. Is it safe to say, and I was covering the Giants a little bit more distant than what I am now at the time. So I was aware I was covering more of the NFL, but I had an eye on the Giants because they had such a haul in the draft that year. Like they really had the opportunity to make some things happen. What was your stance, or what did you think about the pick of Daniel Jones when it first came down?
Yeah, I keep it real with you. I was a Haskins guy that year. I was Dwayne Haskins, R.I.P. to Dwayne Haskins, but I was heavy Dwayne Haskins. And when they had it was like getting close to the draft, and I remember hearing rumors about Daniel Jones, and you just brush them off like those are just rumors. And when it happened, I think we've seen compilation videos. I think everybody was shocked, everybody was floored when we actually picked Daniel Jones, and I mean that was the initial thing, and a lot of people were upset. Me, I think I put out a tweet like, you know what? Pretty much just prove me wrong. You know what I mean? How I feel about you, Daniel Jones, right now when you got drafted to the Giants, just prove me wrong, and let's see what happened. But that's where I was at. I was upset about it.
So I'll tell you, in my evaluations, I had Haskins rated as a higher quarterback than Daniel Jones. I thought that the raw skills had a higher upside. I thought Jones was the more polished guy coming out of college, but I thought Haskins had the higher ceiling, and all he needed was a stable structure in his life. What we know now, we know that the Giants would not have been a great fit for Dwayne Haskins because it wasn't a stable structure, right? Like Daniel Jones has had 3 different head coaches in his time as the Giants quarterback. That wouldn't have been great for Dwayne Haskins either. And so I know in hindsight, a lot of people would go back and go, well, the people who had Haskins as the quarterback, they were wrong. But in reality, has Daniel Jones really been like that much better? Or are we looking at somebody that just got more of an opportunity than the other person did? And RIP to Dwayne Haskins. I think one of the interesting things that I saw about the draft and when Daniel Jones was drafted and what turned me off to the pick is that it seemed as if the Daniel Jones selection came based off of the recommendation and evaluations from the Manning family and their kind of their sphere. And I just don't understand how you can take for face value people who have a vetting interest in this young man being selected. He was a He was a guy who was coached by the same
Cutcliffe.
guy that coached Eli Manning,
Yeah,
right?
Cutcliffe. Yep.
So it's like when you think about it that way, I was like, I just don't think that's a great reason to draft a quarterback just because this is what he did. And then if I'm being honest about it, I went, okay, tall, good-looking white guy who, with a decent arm, check him off in any NFL boxes as a first-round quarterback, right? That seems to be the only thing you need these days. And so I was looking at it with a real critical eye. I can be honest and say I was looking for the flaws early, right? Because I thought there were flaws and I wasn't looking for the positives necessarily. I was looking for the flaws. And I think that if fans are just honest about what side they were on to start with, it would make this conversation a lot easier to have in Big Blue Nation, but people don't want to be honest about it. Like the people who hate on Daniel Jones act like they gave him a fair shot from the beginning, and a lot of them didn't. I know because I remember the tweets.
Yeah.
Every time he did something wrong, it was a magnifying glass on it, and then subsequently, every time he did something right, there was a magnifying glass on that as well.
Yeah, no, like so. Like the whole, Eli, like I got to take myself back to that time. At that time when they were talking about, Cutcliffe being his coach, and he also coached Eli and being at the Manning Academy and all that other stuff. At that point in time, I was over Eli Manning. Like I was over Eli Manning too at that time. So I didn't want anything to do with a guy that was even familiar to or similar to Eli Manning. So when we got him, you know what? Same thing. I had my thoughts already predetermined. And I was like, you know what? 6'5", 235 pounds, that's Eli Manning. Then you hear him talk, you're like, oh my God, that's Eli Manning,
Eli
right?
Manning, yeah.
Right. And then, you see him play. Then, I went back once we drafted, I went back and watched more and more tape, and I still wasn't impressed by it. Still wasn't impressed by it. And then the season happened. We lose the first two games. They throw Daniel Jones in there. Tampa Bay game, comeback victory, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I like what I'm seeing. I'm gonna shut up. The guy can run. The guy can throw. And you know what? I started giving him that chance, and I actually liked what I saw a little bit outside of the fumbling issues. But he was a gunslinger. Where at that time Eli was checked down. Eli is what we would call him at the time, and everything. And just seeing somebody take the chances down the field, ultimately, if you fast forward to now, he's not taking any chances down the field, and it is what it is. But I've been back and forth on Daniel Jones for a while now. Like I said, when we first got him, I was down that first season. I'm like, okay, I can see some flashes here. And then the Judge years and the Garrett years, and like it's like, let's get this guy off the team.
You're speeding, baby. Let's bring it back. You speeding.
You got it.
I want to break this thing down into 3 sections. I want to break it down into Pat Shurmur, right? So he had a year with Pat Shurmur.
Yep.
That was the year, in my opinion, where he showed the most upside. But he also showed what he could be on the others. Like, you got the full spectrum. I think that the Pat Shurmur year is where the division in the fan base really came, like that fissure that we have between the people who love Daniel Jones and are going to rock with him until the end, and the people who have been out on Daniel Jones almost from the moment that he was selected. I think that Pat Shurmur year really set it up, because you saw a guy that had the capability to push the ball down the field. If you remember, Slayton was getting off, right?
Yeah.
Like Slayton was getting off as a rookie. A lot of people believed that they had found a wide receiver 1 in Slayton as a rookie because of what he did, and that was based off the fact that Daniel Jones was willing to push the ball downfield. But it also came with turnovers, right? Yeah. It came with turnovers, and then he compounded it by also adding in the fumbles.
Yeah.
So now we move to the second phase, which is the Joe Judge phase, where I believe one of the reasons that we saw what we saw outside of injury was a level of conservativeness that made him gun shy to turn the ball over. And we all know that if you're afraid to make a mistake, then you don't take the risk that's involved with the big play. And that's where we started to see his unwillingness to let it rip, or his apprehension about letting it rip deep. What were your thoughts about Daniel Jones, and what did you see in the community during those Joe Judge years?
Yeah, I'm glad you reeled me back. You reeled me back in because I was ready to go. So going from Shermer to Joe Judge, and I'll just start from the beginning of Joe Judge. When we got him, another one of those times where you're like, who is this guy? Like, we knew he was getting the interview, we knew he was coming from the Patriots, but then when he actually got the job, you're like, okay. And then you heard him speak. He's saying everything that you want to hear, and things like that. So it was one thing, but once Garrett came into the picture, because I always believed that Garrett wasn't Joe Judge's pick. I think that was a John Mara pick. They forced him on the Judge because he was a first time young. You kind of have some anticipation because of what Garrett did with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, and Tony Romo before that. And then you just see, well, to your point, you start seeing the conservative play from Daniel Jones. You start seeing all the hook the curl routes that they're running, and you're like, okay, well, year one, you got a guy that's fresh. Yes, he had the turnover issue, but he was letting the ball go. Then you see the first year of Joe Judge, where, okay, now you're being a little bit more conservative. We see that you're leaning on Saquon Barkley, but not even that much then, because Saquon Barkley was involved in the passing game, in what was that, 2020 and 2021, those 2 years. And but you never seen him really stretch the ball out too much. There was some games against the Pittsburgh Steelers he was able to hit Slayton deep. Slayton was always, his security blanket. But yeah, you start noticing that the offense is not looking like, first of all, not looking like how Dallas looked. First of all, that's one thing, and we can throw in a couple different factors of why that happened. Offensive line is always going to be an issue here, and another reason why we have this divide too is that there's a lot of fingers to point in a lot of places, but you just start seeing that difference where he's holding on to the ball a little bit long. You don't see that same type of tenacity. He can still be tough and stand in the pocket. That was never an issue. He would stand and throw it. And then you're starting to see just the check downs and not trusting himself and waiting a little bit too long to let things go. And you're starting to say, like, well, what's going on? And I argued with people then, like, just give him a chance. We had last year. He probably reads and watches sports media. He knows about the turnovers. He knows about the interceptions, the fumbles, and he's just being more conservative. But they took that gunslinger out of him. If I want to blame it all on them, they took it from him. I'll leave it at that for that point.
Yeah. So what I would say, and I think this is lost on the development of Daniel Jones, the Joe Judge years never got legit Saquon Barkley. Remember, first year he gets hurt.
Yep.
Gone.
Yep.
So now that offense that Jason Garrett is used to running is predicated on having a running back that can make things happen. So Jason Garrett came here thinking, I've got an Ezekiel Elliott plus, right?
Yeah.
And now he never gets an Ezekiel Elliott plus. So now he has to tweak his game, his philosophy, how he wants to run offense to fit a guy who turned the ball over a bunch. So now if he's still turning the ball over a bunch, but we've got no Saquon to lean on.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that in his mind, the best mode is to, okay, let's be a little bit more conservative with this game. Right. I am somebody who admittedly does not put all of the blame on Jason Garrett. Because again, this same offense that everybody in New York said was trash put up major hella numbers in Dallas, right?
Yeah.
So is it the offense or is it the pieces? Last time I checked, Jason Garrett doesn't get to pick the groceries as the offensive coordinator, right?
True.
right? So Jason
True.
Garrett didn't tell you guys to go out there and select these players that you're selecting. He didn't tell you to go out there and get these offensive linemen that you had. He's working with what he has, and in his opinion, the best way for success is to tap into the short game,
Get it out
tap
quick.
into what Daniel Jones does really, really well, which is get the ball out of his hand quick, decisive, he's accurate. Boom. Okay, cool. Now that doesn't equate to big wins, but I'll say this, and it gets lost because there wasn't a lot of winning, right? The Joe Judge years were a lot of competitive games.
It was.
It's a
Yeah.
lot of competitive games that they lost. And why did they lose them? Because the quarterback made critical errors in a conservative offense. That
Yeah.
always rung, and it was one of my major indictments on him. Like, bro, this is an offense that is predicated on you just getting the ball out of your hand and making plays, right? Like just getting it to the people, the playmakers, letting them go to work. And in the most critical moments, you always made the wrong decision, right? Like,
No, that's the way to look
or
at it.
or in the critical moment when you did something well, you did something foolish, like try to run over defensive players and get hurt. Like, what are we doing here? And so I think from that standpoint, not having a Saquon Barkley, essentially for either one of those years, because the first year he was gone for almost every game. The second year of that, he got that injury that had him out for what, 6 to 7
The ankle, yeah.
game stretch.
Yeah.
So like they didn't get a lot of Saquon Barkley in those years, and magically the next year when Saquon's healthy and has his best season since his rookie season, the Giants have their best season, and Daniel Jones has his best season. So that brings us to the current era, right? That brings us to the Brian Daboll era. Hey, listen, if you're not following him, by the way, make sure that you follow him on anywhere that you can go, but definitely on X, because we over there getting it live on a regular basis at Big Dash Knows. That's BigDashKnows. If you are watching on YouTube, you can see it up there. If you're not watching on YouTube and you're listening wherever you get your podcast from, make sure that you check him out. Before we left, I wanted to talk about the Brian Daboll era. When Brian Daboll came in, everybody had hailed it as he's going to do to Daniel Jones what he did to Josh Allen.
Yeah.
I just want to get what you thought about that when you first heard everybody saying that he was going to turn Daniel Jones into Josh Allen 2.0.
Yeah. So you figure when we hired Brian Daboll, Joe Shane came in, Joe Shane, then Brian Daboll. We were coming off a 4-win season. And I remember saying to people, like, just thinking about the coaching staff, Brian Daboll was a hot name at that point in time, like a very hot name as an offensive coordinator. And I remember people asking, like, what's your prediction for the season? I'm like, well, I think the coaching staff alone gives us at least 3 more wins on top of the 4. So I'm like 7-10, this, that, and the third. I'm pretty much thinking it's going to be like, I want an open competition between Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor, because like I said, at that point in time, I'm through with it. And I remember even like Tyrod Taylor would post on Instagram, and I used to be like, how many weeks you think before you take over and stuff? I never got an answer from him or anything like that, but just throwing things out there because that's how through I was with it. So I think that's where the energy came from. Like, it was more about the coaching staff and not knowing what the offense was going to look like. And I was like, you know what, we can catch people by surprise. And I always had faith in that first game against Tennessee. I'm like, somehow I think we can beat Tennessee. And Tennessee was a contender the year before.
Yep.
And I'm like, you know what? They don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to do. I think we can go in there and win. And the offense was a little dead in the first half. Like, it was the big running play by Saquon Barkley that really turned things around. People forget about that a little bit. Daniel Jones did have the deep pass to Sterling Shepard. That was one thing, but it was like a different type of energy. And I think it was more about the coaching than it was, a lot of the players. And just getting back to all right, there's some excitement here with the New York Giants. Okay, what can Daniel Jones do? And I found myself being, okay, here comes Daniel Jones, to like, okay, here comes Daniel Jones. Let's see what he can possibly do. And you see us start winning games, and next thing you know, we're 7-1 and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, even though he wasn't putting up crazy numbers at that point in time, it was all about just winning. I don't care how we do it. If it's a defensive game, if it's a slow game, if we're just bleeding out the clock and doing things like that, controlling the game with with a run game. I just want to win, and that's what my feeling was in 2022. I just want to win. So when a lot of people were complaining about the overall stats, and I don't want to get too far ahead, and well, Dan, is Saquon Barkley carrying the team? And I remember arguing with people like, but what about, like, Saquon Barkley was a big part of this offense, but like when you look at Daniel Jones, extending plays and getting first downs with his own legs, I'm like, yo, this is a team effort. It's not just Saquon Barkley, and I'm giving Daniel Jones, some credit, because he was responsible for the Carolina game. He iced that game with a first down run, and pretty much. So I'm like, nah, you know what? I like what Brian Dable is doing. I like Mike Kafka. It looks like there's some energy to this team, and I was ready to ride at that point in time, and we were winning games. So I think the energy was good there, but it was always, people saying, you know what, this is cool and all, but Daniel Jones is not putting up these, no crazy numbers. And I'm like, listen, man, we winning games. We can. This is his first year. You know what? Are they dumbing down the playbook? Possibly. But as long as we winning, I'm all right now. And that's kind of the feeling that I had. But there was always, even when we were winning, there were always people chirping. And I think, and it's funny too, because I've been a Giants fan for a long time, right? I don't know any other football team in my opinion. And it's just like, at the end of the day, would you rather be right, or would you rather the New York Giants actually win games? And I think a lot of people were so stuck on being, well, I just don't like the guy, or he's not any good. So when he was doing good, they just gave everybody else credit. So I think that had a lot to do with the 2022 season.
So and you make good points about the fan base, and I want to lock in on Jones, because it's what we're here to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I heard you talk about people were saying it was Saquon,
Mm-hmm.
carrying the team. I want to point you to the one thing that I feel like is an indictment on Daniel Jones from that 2022 season, because I'm with you. I don't really care how it gets done, right? Winning is the point. I don't care how it gets done. But this is what Brian Dable and the arrival of Brian Dable was supposed to mean. And by the way, this is what people are still putting on Brian Dable, because all of a sudden 2023 was Mike Kafka, but 2022 was somehow Brian Dable. 23 was Mike Kafka, and so now 24 is going to be Dable again. They're putting elite level offensive genius on Brian Dable. Now, I looked at it and went, they're doing what they need to do to win. That's get the ball to Saquon Barkley by any means necessary, right?
Yeah.
First 10 weeks, first 9 games, they go 7-2.
Mm-hmm.
Saquon Barkley is having an MVP level season. Saquon Barkley gets hurt, starts having to manage his body, not at the tip top shape that you would like, and in the back half they win 2 games.
Yep.
To me, this is the indictment on Daniel Jones. It's the thing that people who don't like Daniel Jones point to, and it's the thing that people who love Daniel Jones just gloss over, right? Because they only look at the wins in those games, and more specifically the playoff win and how Daniel Jones played in the playoff win, while forgetting all about the playoff loss. So if you look at the people who hate if you look at the people who hate on Daniel Jones, the people who hate on Daniel Jones says, well, look at what he did once Saquon got hurt. Like, look at what the team did when it was Daniel Jones' team again. And then the people who love on Daniel Jones go, well, look, he didn't have any weapons, and so he did the best he could. And then you get into the playoffs and they go, well, look what he did to the Minnesota Vikings, who had, by the way, the worst defense in the NFL that year. And then the people who hate Daniel Jones say, well, look what he did at Philly.
Yeah.
So like, it has been, I don't think there's ever been anything like this in sports where a player has been so uniquely divisive because of the positives that he's brought and the negatives that he's brought to the table. I can't, like, even Eli Manning didn't have this divisive nature throughout his career. And quite as it's kept, Eli Manning had years that I would have definitely fired him. Like, Eli Manning would have never got to Super Bowl Eli because he was bad. But people were still rocking with him. Oh, you need to get him more. You got to get him a better line. You got to get him this. Like, Giants fans were in the boat for Eli in a way that they're not in the boat for Daniel Jones. And I think this is interesting, but I think that the way that these seasons have played out, that it's built this level of division where Giants fans are like, I can't be in the middle. I gotta be on one side or the other. Do you find yourself like overcorrecting at times when it comes to Daniel Jones, like almost wanting to give him even more benefit of the doubt than you would just because you feel like you've been hard on him, or vice versa? Do you find yourself being more hard on him because you were rocking for him for so long? Like where do you find yourself at this point as a Giants fan, and where do you think the tipping point is in 2024?
Yeah, so I'll run down the timeline. So I started not being a fan of Daniel Jones when we drafted him. Then I was encouraged by his rookie season, and then I was out on Daniel Jones again 2020, 2021. And then in 2022 I was surprised by it. And then going into 2023, like this time last year, I was out the window. I was like, you know what? I saw what we did. I was going off of the Minnesota Vikings game. And when you talk about that Philadelphia Eagles game, yes, Daniel Jones did a horrible job. But I remember at the coin toss, and it was Brandon Graham barking at the coin toss, and I'm looking at the Giants. Dexter Lawrence is standing there, the captains are standing there, and nobody is saying anything back to him. And I just remember, like, I got more energy than the Giants got in this game. And then, we got our butts whooped. And I just was like, okay. And then I said, and I drink the Kool-Aid. I'll keep it 100 with you. I drink the Kool-Aid. I'm thinking, okay, you know what? He did what he could do behind this offensive line. Saquon Barkley was great. We got him tagged. He's not really happy about it. But you know what? He turned down some money. We pick up Darren Waller. And I'm like, okay, so for me, I'm like, you got Darren Waller as a substitute to not having a real wide receiver one. But what I liked about Darren Waller is like, okay, if you use him correctly, you attack the seams. You attack the seams, that opens up everything underneath. And in my head, we got Jalen Hyatt. We getting Wan'Dale Robinson back. I'm like, okay, the offense is making sense. And then what was it, September 10th? Dallas 40-0 in the rain. Barkley sitting on his butt in the rain, shaking his head after the tip interception for the touchdown. And I'm like, wow. What happened? And I find myself again, I'm sitting here like, okay, yes, I know the offensive line did not play well. You got the guys picking up off of the couch. We're not utilizing the wide receiver, but I found myself with less and less grace for Daniel Jones. I was at the San Francisco 49er game, and I remember sitting next to this family of Giants fans. And I would see like, Hyatt is open. Hyatt is open. And like, why isn't he throwing the ball and stuff like that? And we didn't have Barkley because he got hurt in Arizona. But I just remember, like, you know what? I'm starting to get sour, and that's when it started. And then by the time we got to that Seattle game, and that rookie picked them up, picked them off, and took it to the house for that. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think that, he's the Achilles heel to, for the Giants. No matter how I felt about 2022, when you went to expand this offense, expand the scheme, give him a little bit more, I guess, room to make plays. When you open up the full, he couldn't excel in it. And then that's when another split came where it's the offensive line. He still doesn't have a wide receiver one. And I remember one argument because obviously we had the whole Tyrod Taylor and the whole time the DeVito thing happened. And I was like, well, they seem to be making better decisions. They seem to be getting the ball out a little bit quicker. And even if it's not a completion, you know what? They're able to, throw it into the stands. Oh no, the offensive line is just playing better. I'm like, huh? The offensive line is playing
better with the backups, huh?
Playing better with the backups.
And the people that's off the street, they're just playing better.
But Andrew Thomas came back. I'm like, yeah, Andrew Thomas is just one person. Like I'm seeing, and John Michael Schmitz, I call him my son. John Michael Schmitz was getting his butt whooped all season. There was pressure up the middle the whole season. They was dealing, but they were just a little bit quicker, or they just able to manipulate the pocket just a little bit more than what Daniel Jones was able to do. And it's just like what. I go from 2023 back to 2022 now because I feel in 2022 where it's like, can Daniel Jones even do something? Should it be an open competition between him and Locke now? How I felt it should have been with him and Tyrod Taylor. So that's where I'm at right now. But again, I'm a fan at the end of the day. I'm going to ride with the New York Giants at the end of the day. And if I'm going to fast forward all the way, when I watched Hard Knocks and Joe Shane said, it's Daniel Jones's year, I said, you know what? There's nothing else I can do about it. I'm in the car. This is my team. I got to ride with it. And especially after the draft, too, because I was a big Michael Penix fan. And, we messaged back and forth about Michael Penix. I was a big Michael Penix fan. And I remember catching smoke. I did a Michael Penix video. He won't even get drafted till the second round. He might be there at 47. And I'm telling guys, like, okay,
he ain't gonna be there, brother.
Oh, okay. I had somebody apologize to me too once he went. It's like, you were right. It's like, yeah, you can't deny some people, man. But yeah, that's just my whole timeline when it came to it. So right now, I'm in that wait and see mode of this is supposed to be the opportunity where they have a year out. I mean, at the end of the year where they can get out of the contract. And it's not just about winning, I think, for the New York Giants when it comes to Daniel Jones. It's about winning, yes, but also believing that he can take you to the next level. Not just take you to the playoffs, but win your championship. And I'm not there. I'm not there right now.
Here's the interesting thing, and we got to get out of here. But the interesting thing about all of this is that when 2022 happened, they said, well, Daniel Jones won, and that's why we needed to pay him. And nobody stopped to say, yo, if Tyrod Taylor was in here, would we have done about the same thing? Like, was what Daniel Jones did and what he brought to the table, was it that much better than what a healthy Tyrod Taylor throughout the year would have been able to do? And I think based off of what we saw in 2023, the answer is no. Like if Tyrod Taylor, and this is, by the way, this is low key why Tyrod Taylor did not win that job, in my opinion. Like he won the job in the preseason, leading up into the year. They gave the job to Daniel Jones and said that they saw what they needed to see because they liked how he responded to getting pushed. And I said, but what about the performance? Because I was at some of these training camps, practices, and like the moxie was with Tyrod. It's always been with Tyrod. When he walks into the huddle, he doesn't look like a backup. He looks like he's supposed to be there. And I think that's where the mistake was made. We're gonna pay Daniel Jones when in reality they probably should have did a Kansas City Chiefs. You know, hey, you know what?
We just gonna
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Daniel Jones. We appreciate what you did for this organization, but go find your next endeavor, and we're going to hit the reset with somebody in this draft this year. I think that would have been a way, because then if 2023 is what it was, people going, okay, but we've got a rookie under contract, and now we got all this cap space, and now we got him locked up for 4 years, and a 5th year option with them before we had to pay him the astronomical money that they get. But instead, you gave him the money, so now you're not only attached to him for 23, you're attached to him for 24. Mm-hmm. Maybe you got a way to get out of it in 25, but still, I appreciate it, man. I think that this is a really interesting, young man who I believe has done everything he can possibly do to be good. This isn't like some schlub that's been cheating us out of the work ethic, right? Like there's some dudes who you like, yo, he's not good because he doesn't care enough. Yeah. I don't think that's the case. And I think internally, that's why it's so hard to root against him, because you have a feeling that he's a good dude who cares about this thing and really wants to get it right. But at the end of the day, my guy, it just hasn't been good enough.
I say, if his name was James Earl Jones instead of Daniel Jones, he wouldn't have got that chance. He wouldn't got the chances that he got. He wouldn't got the chances. But I will say this: at the end of so Joe Chain got here. He didn't pick up the 5th year option. Outside looking in, he already knew Daniel Jones wasn't in. That's my opinion of it. They didn't pick up the 5th year option.
They knew.
After 2022, you put yourself between a rock and a hard place, and this is why I say I might not have agreed with it, but I understood why they did it. And I'm just thinking, if this is your first time being a GM, and by the grace of God, you go to the playoffs. And yes, Saquon Barkley is a big part of that. Daniel Jones, it's also, we can say everyone is still a big part of that because he is the quarterback. And I think that yes, and a lot of people, hindsight is what it is. A lot of people say, yeah, nobody else would have gave him a deal. Nobody else would have signed him. And I always push back, like, if Saquon would have signed that deal at the bye, Daniel Jones gets the tag, and then none of this stuff exists either. But I just think with the New York Giants going to the playoffs, and not only that, winning the playoff game, it became too hard for them to make that decision. Because had you let Daniel Jones, test the free agent market, and possibly if he was able to, get a deal somewhere else, and you go into 2023 and you have the same exact thing happen and Tyrod Taylor's the quarterback, then it's a whole nother issue. It's a whole nother issue. But people like to learn the hard way. You know what? Believe it the first time you see it. That's where I'm at right now. And even though I switched up after the 2022 season, I'm thinking right now, like, it's going to take something astronomical for me to be back on the Daniel Jones's bandwagon. Again, I'm going to root for the guy because I'm a New York Giants fan. That's what it is. But I got the side eye on him for sure.
And that's really what it is. At the end of the day, if you're a New York Giants fan, that should trump everything, right? Like, if you're a Giants fan, it should trump everything, because you want the Giants to win. Rooting for the Giants to lose just so you can get rid of Daniel Jones is probably some of the most sucker stuff I've ever heard in my life. I wanted to say something else, but I ain't gonna say it. But
yeah,
that's some real lame stuff right there. Like, I believe if Joe Shane is going to be as cutthroat as he was with Saquon Barkley, he should be that same level of cutthroat with Daniel Jones. Absolutely. I am going on record as saying this is Daniel Jones' last year as a New York Giant, regardless of how he plays. He could go out there and light it up. They are done with the Daniel Jones experiment. All of this, he $40 million quarterback, and this is Daniel's year. I think it's programming. I think that Joe Shane is programming through Hard Knocks. I think he is letting people know that he should be putting up the numbers of his contemporaries and playing of that level? And if he's not, then why are we giving him this much money? And why are we putting all these resources around him? So I think that what Joe Schoen has done is said, I'm going to take all the excuses away. I'm going to take away the team is revolving around Saquon Barkley. Okay, that's no longer a factor. Oh, well, the team can't pass block. I brought in 2 pass blocking offensive linemen to put next to my number 1 center in the draft, and then my 2 first rounders outside. I also added the best wide receiver in the draft, if you ask me, to go with a receiving core that's actually probably underrated because Daniel Jones is their quarterback, right? So
just look at the targets.
All the excuses are out the window. I don't want to hear he's coming off of a knee injury. Like that ain't gonna fly.
Yeah.
I don't know what type of year he could have that would allow him to keep his job after this year.
And it would have to be an NFC Championship, in my opinion. It would have to be that.
Hey, NFC Championship game, and he keeps his job. You heard it from Big Dash. Put him on record. NFC Championship, and he keeps his job. Hey, Big Dash, I appreciate you joining me, man. Tell everybody where they can listen to your work or watch your work or follow you.
Yeah, so first off, thank you, Coach. And like I said, anybody with Coach in front of their name, I give them the utmost respect, man. The utmost respect. I had some great coaches coming up in my life, and I just appreciate guys that pretty much, grow the youth. Like from Pop Warner all the way up, man. Like I said, if you got some good coaches in your life, it takes it past the game of football. So I appreciate you for having me. I appreciate you for what you do. And like I said, Big Dash knows on all social media platforms except for Facebook. I got to get that figured out. But yeah, that's where you can find me at, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Big Dash knows over there, and see all that content. That's all the time we have for today. New York Giants on SI. I want to thank Big Dash Knows for joining me. Make sure you follow him everywhere at Big Dash Knows. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the New York Giants on SI's YouTube channel. That way you can hit that notification bell and you'll know every day when I have uploaded another edition of this podcast. Until next time, I'm Coach Gene Clemons, and I have a giant issue.